I'm Dennis Horian, coming to you from Atlanta, Georgia at adoptahorse.org. In 2002, I came out as one of the Catholic clergy abuse survivors, and we helped victims of crime down here and in New Hampshire. We have a number of people that we've helped and a number of institutions that we lobbied for better services for victims of crime. The first case that we're going to discuss today is going to be one of a number of cases that you'll see over the days and months that we're going to be discussing based upon our history of helping survivors with our organization's assets and resources. The first one is going to be the case that we made about the Catholic Church in New Hampshire starting out in 2002. In 2002, Roger Chadwick, and currently in private practice in Nashua, New Hampshire, negotiated an agreement with the Catholic Church. They agreed that they had endangered children, and in return for the option to study them for 5 years, they gave them immunity from prosecution. Peter Heed, the then Attorney General, signed off on the agreement. In 2002, a number of survivors were coming forward, and the church had to acknowledge the number of survivors and to also acknowledge the number of offending priests. In that agreement, neither was accomplished. They, first of all, set an untimely agreement of November 2002 to end the report. In Peter Heed's report, he suggested that there were 27 known felons from the Catholic Church's pedophile class of priest. And he talked about 67 survivors of child sex crimes from them. During that period of time, they published a report that was a summarization of the law limiting their ability to prosecute for sex crimes by the Catholic Church. And they talked about investigators interviewing 6 different victims. In the entire report, not one victim of child sex crimes from the Catholic Church's predators was given a chance to say one word. Even the victims that were discussed had nothing to say about their cases. They were precluded from saying anything. Unfortunately, Peter Heed was turfed out of office virtually right away because he was chasing women in his office. Shortly thereafter, he was also accused of a DUI. In the case of the women, there was some allegations of the people investigating the case that he actually interfered with the investigation, and nothing was ever done. In the case of his DUI, again, there was an allegation of him interfering with the case, and he got a $500 fine. I'm not sure how many people in the state of New Hampshire just receive only a $500 fine for DUI, but it seems pretty lenient in both cases. As a result of him being turfed out of office, the governor appointed Governor Benson had his attorney appointed, first of all, as an assistant in the district attorney's office, in the attorney general's office, and then afterwards she became the attorney general for the state of New Hampshire. We contacted her because we wanted, when she actually started implementing the study protocol, the Catholic Church's attorneys embarrassed her at every turn. There was no conversation about what questions she could ask. There was no conversation in the report about what things she could do, who she could talk to. And so as a result of being humiliated in court for 2 years by the Catholic Church's attorney, she made an agreement that allowed the Catholic Church to be studied as though there was some kind of clerical problem. And she basically took, instead of telling the church that she was going to cancel the immunity agreement, she stood there and made sure that no conversation about the location or disposition of the current predators that the Catholic Church had still under payroll, and she refused to have KPMG offer any conversation to the victims of crime. We even went to the court on behalf of the victims of crime in the New Hampshire community, and the court sent us back a rejection of our plea request to be involved in the discussion, saying that we didn't have the right form. We called the judge's office, and the law clerk didn't know what the right form was. Bottom line was that there was no conversation given about making sure that the priests were no longer a danger to the community, and she also made sure that victims didn't have anything to say about what was done within these reports. Now, as a result of that, she made an agreement that basically took the retreats off the table because the Catholic Church said they had to spend money defending themselves, and basically they didn't have to defend themselves from Kelly Ayotte. She was such a poor attorney with so little experience that she was actually humiliated at every turn by both the church and the state. And she was also humiliated by the church's attorneys on a regular basis. When she made that agreement, there was two things that she absolutely knew because we sent her emails about this case. First, Paul Grollo was a licensed therapist who had cases paid against him for molesting young boys. He was the actual vocation counselor for the Catholic Church at the time when he was doing this. As a result of those cases, we suggested that she actually take this man and remove his therapy license, which is both a New Hampshire mental health therapy license, and we asked her to remove the pastoral license of all things that he had given to him by the state of New Hampshire. We filed a formal complaint with the Mental Health Board. Under her watch, they decided that they were going to have a part-time librarian look into the case instead of one of her lead investigators or an attorney on her staff. And in that case, the way it works in New Hampshire is that if you make a complaint against a therapist, unless the complaint is founded, they don't even put it on his record. To this day, Paul Grollo has a still stellar record, even though for the last 10 years he's been a licensed therapist, and he's still a licensed therapist to this day, in spite of knowing that he was a child molester. We also, at this period of time, received two situations that came up as a result of our activity. In the retreat, the last retreat, Bishop McCormick came to the retreat, and when we questioned him about having therapists with licenses, he said, "I can't give you the name of the therapist, but I can give you their initials." He actually talked about another set of initials besides Paul Grollo that weren't even mentioned. We told Kelly Ayotte at the time, before she signed the final agreement with the Catholic Church about what she was going to actually study, we told her that the bishop had mentioned that there was a second therapist. One of our volunteers was actually contacted by one of his victims up in Sheila, up in New Hampshire, and she asked us to out this man to make sure that she had some sense of justice because she never got anything done. What he did to her was, when she was 15, 16, 17, she was in a youth group, and he was mentoring the youth group. When she turned 18 and she became a freshman at the Keene State, she contacted Paul Grollo for counseling services. As a priest and a licensed therapist, he traded sex, including oral and intercourse, for his counseling sessions. Because she was 18 at the time, she was considered an adult, and the Catholic Church refused to discuss her case with her. In that particular case, she received no settlement, no recognition. Paul Grollo was still having his license and still able to counsel people under the guise of a respectable operation. We were disgusted. One of our volunteers who was working with Sheila actually went and took a session with the man and told her that she was a victim of a child sex crime and that she was interested in talking to him about doing some counseling. At the time, he agreed to counsel her for the ramifications of her sex crimes against her, and he did not tell her about the allegations made against him. In short, he put her at additional risk. The pictures that you see that we have of Paul Grollo were taken in that session. We told Kelly Ayotte that he was not only a danger, but he was a potential long-term danger. We asked her to out him as a predator and to be prepared to offer his victims who were counseled by him an opportunity to get some state mental health assistance so that they could actually have, his victims could actually have some assistance to combat the after effects of the abuse against them. She refused to do that also. She signed the agreement with KPMG knowing exactly what was going on. The church said nothing, she said nothing, and the local press said nothing. We went up there with the last money that I had from my settlement with the church, and we went across the state of New Hampshire and handed out 300 flyers off horseback, letting people know exactly what was going on. This was not an informational tour. This was a tour to do two things. Number one, make sure that the community knew that it was not over, and two, to also look for sites where we could actually take our horses and bring our horse therapy operation to the state of New Hampshire. What we found out was that in spite of our efforts, they refused to do anything. July 4th, 2005, Sheila lost her life to a combination of suicide and drugs, and before she could find any justice. Kelly Ayotte was responsible in large part because she did nothing, and when the church decided that they, with Kelly Ayotte, were not going to investigate the priest or their current location, she knew that she had no options left, or so she felt. In the last 10 years, we have gone to the point where we even asked her, if you couldn't take away his licenses, the least you could do is issue him a chicken hawk license. A chicken hawk is a man who chases young boys for sexual gratification. That's what he did. That's who he is. That's what he does. She couldn't even get the point of that exercise. We have continued to do that over the last 10 years. Now that we're a mature organization and that we have the ability to feed our horses based upon our model and a successful model working as an enterprise nonprofit, we don't need outside money and we don't rely on donations to do what we do. We actually have a quality enough program to have a horse program that is self-supporting with or without her help. We were not able to expand to New Hampshire because we had to get ourselves financially secured in Georgia. We would love to come back up to New Hampshire to do what we do and to expand our program, but we need to have the support of the community, and we find it difficult given that we contacted the local newspapers back in the day, and they did nothing, and they required nothing, and they said nothing. We contacted the local newspapers again in the last week, and the reporter from North Conway that we contacted actually remembered us on horseback when he met us in Milford as a reporter. They wrote nothing then. 10 years later, he wrote nothing again. The Keene Sentinel, the Concord Monitor, and the Union Leader all knew about it. The Union Leader editor told me that in 2005, they had written enough stories about the abuse and they were going to move on. Unfortunately, nobody cared about Sheila but us. She is the only person that we've tried to help who actually committed suicide that we lost to this effort. She asked us to tell her story, and we are telling her story, and we will continue to tell her story. If you take a look at our Facebook page, Unofficial Senator Kelly Ayotte, you're going to see the descriptions and the actual dates involved and the people who are involved in this. We want his license taken away. We want to find out who the other predator is who's had a license, if he still has a license, who was also a child molester that the Catholic Church gave the education so that he could become a therapist. Kelly knew that there were at least 2 therapists who were child molesters. She refused to take their license. She refused to do anything about it. And to this day, she's a morally bankrupt individual. We even said to her at the time, you're a mother with 2 children. How can you possibly talk about this being an acceptable behavior for therapists in the community? If it was your daughters, how would you feel if you found out that they were in the company in private sessions with a child molester? She did nothing even about that. To this day, nothing has been done. He's still a therapist. And now we look back and find out that Kelly actually got an endorsement from the Catholic Church. Instead of 5 years of studies, she only did 2 years of studies. When the Catholic Church was done with it, she was done with it. Bottom line was, in the first report she did, she said they had an abysmal record of compliance. In the second report, they just laughed her off, and she said they did better. They didn't do better. They're still the same people doing the same thing the same way. Nothing has changed. The only thing that has changed is the fact that the Catholic Church has been able to have a stellar reputation. No one went to jail in the hierarchy of the church, and only a few of the major predators that had absolute cases against them actually went to prison. My predator, my cousin, Francis Talbot, was a state employee for 30 to 40 years working in the criminal as a chaplain in both the jail and the juvenile detention facility on River Road. They refused to release his personnel record. They refused to release his file. The church has a habit of once the predator dies, they destroy his file. And nobody wants to see how he was able to rape state prisoners under their jurisdiction and get away with it. Bottom line is, she actually got an endorsement from the Catholic Church, and she, as the good Catholic girl that she is, did not stand up for victims. She stood up for her career and her future. We're asking the people of the state of New Hampshire to turf her out of office. Not that this is political, but anybody who is that morally bankrupt does not deserve to have the respect of the individuals that she is talking to. My suggestion to you is, she is not knowing what she's doing is a fallacy. That it was unintentional was a fallacy. She knew exactly what she's doing. For her career, she's now going to get long-time, lifetime opportunities to collect money on state salaries and on federal salaries. Unfortunately, the taxpayers, for the study that we're talking about, ended up paying half of the cost of a $500,000 study. Neither the church nor the state will release how much money the taxpayers actually paid. Unfortunately, at this time, there are no excuses. If you hire her as a U.S. Senator again, we're not going to stop. We're going to call her what she is. A morally bankrupt mother of two with no ability to take care of the church or the victims of crime in a timely manner. She has put more people at risk. Anybody who is a victim of Paul Grollo or any other Catholic priest, and they came forward, right now, the state would do nothing for them. We think that needs to change. We appreciate your time. Have a good day.